All right. This is the introduction to Harvard. And this is our keynote speech of the day, too. And I was wondering how to begin. How do I introduce Harvard? And I thought, let's see what Wikipedia says. So I took the Wikipedia page. And this is exactly what you see, that he shares his birthday with Jesus Christ. I mean, you can't escape it. So if you then go on to see what the public information is, and clearly he was born the same day as Jesus. His nationality is USA. He went to Dartmouth College, and he did his MD from University of Colorado Medical School, and he had promised Mira that he is going to do internship in Israel after he got married, and he kept his promise, and he did his internship in Sheba Medical Center in Israel, followed by his residency at the Longwood Neurology program. He has a faculty appointment at the Brigham and the Harvard Medical School. He was the first incumbent of the Robert L. Kroc Chair in Neurology. He is also the director of ARC&D Center. He set up the Partner Center, and he has got a number of prizes, and Bristol Prize is just one of them. And there's a chair named after him. It's called Samuel L. Wasserstrom Chair. And in fact, it's not named Howard L. Weiner Chair because as long as you're an active faculty member at Harvard, you can't name chair after an active faculty member. So he named this chair after his maternal grandfather, Samuel L. Wasserstrom. And he chose an able person to be the first incumbent, and that happens to be me. And in his prizes, and in fact, I will talk about a little more, is he got the NIH Director's Transformative Award. He has set up a lot of biotech company in autoimmune and telos. He has been very prolific, and he has got 685 papers published, 6 books, 3 movies. And there's a book written about him by Susan Quinn. In fact, I have read it, and it's called Human Trials. But that's public information. So I wanted to see how people, when they know him personally, how do they define Howard? And in fact, Larry Steinman actually took some of the thunder out of this by giving all these names. And I took a little survey. And people call him a neurologist. They also call him an immunologist. They call him a writer. They define him as a filmmaker, director, producer. And people who know him closely, they know he's a philosopher. He's a scholar. He's a builder. In fact, he likes to build nuts and bolts from bottom up, actually. Building C&D, building MS Partner Center, everything. I mean, he just builds it meticulously, which lasts for a long time. He's an avid golfer. He's a wonderful mentor and partner. In fact, I'll talk about it a little more. And that's what I heard all these 2 days. What a wonderful mentor he has been to me, to David, and all of you here. Okay? He has also been a wonderful partner. He is very generous. In fact, every time I go out for lunch or dinner with him, actually, he never lets me pay. And I welcome it every time. All right, and this is the best way to define him. He is a mensch. And I told my brother, my brother is much smarter than me, and he's really a genius level. And I said, I have this friend, colleague, he does all these things. His name is Howard Weiner, and he said to me, you must be kidding. He must have a twin brother with the same name. And that's how he can accomplish all these things, okay? He has got this incredible ability to form partnerships. In fact, I have seen him over the years forming partnerships even with the people it's very difficult to work with. He set up the partnership with Dennis. Not that I'm calling Dennis difficult. He set up Autoimmune Inc. With Bob Bishop, and who was the president of and CEO of Autoimmune. And obviously, he has set, of course, a lifetime partnership with Mira, who's sitting here in the audience. You can see young Howard and Mira in the left side. And you can see hand in hand on the right side when they were promoting MS Partners Center, Partners MS Center. He also is the first incumbent of the Robert L. Kroc chair. This is the chair that was set up by McDonald's, Ray Kroc. He was one of the youngest faculty members of Harvard Medical School. He actually got chair when he was only associate professor. And as we well know how difficult these personal chairs are, and he was one of the youngest incumbents on this chair. And he is a wonderful sportsman. I mean, in fact, not only does he play golf, don't play squash with him. He excellent swimmer, and he has got this ability of a sportsmanship, hand-eye coordination, which is incredible. And this is our first celebration. In fact, I came to the center in 1992-93, and this is our first celebration when the first clinical trial was done for oral tolerance in MS. And you can see there is Howard, and there is David, there's Scotty, and there's me. We are actually celebrating positive results with oral tolerance, giving myelin to these MS patients. Unfortunately, the oral tolerance actually, as a therapy, did not succeed in phase 3 clinical trials. And real mettle of a person you really see under difficult situations. And this is one time when I actually felt what Howard is like. He picked up the phone and called all of us, and I was on the other side. And he said, Vijay, I have a bad news that the phase 3 clinical trial data on oral tolerance did not work. And to me, it looked like somebody in my family had died. But Howard said, you know, not a problem. We'll figure it out. We'll find the way to make it work. Nothing will change. Let's keep going. And that's Howard. He never, ever quits. Then, this is something that if you take a poll from the people who have worked with him, these are his catchphrases. So if you show him a piece of data and he likes it, he says, oh, beautiful. You say, I love it. He say, Howard, we have to buy a new machine. It costs a lot of money, and I'm kind of, talking slowly how much it will cost. He says, how much is it? I said, yeah, it probably costs about $600,000. He says, I approve. No questions asked, right? And then, if he in the middle of a discussion, if he has to say something, a joke pops in his mind, he says, Vijay, I'm going to tell you, this is a joke. And then he'll tell you the joke. So that you don't confuse reality from the joke. Okay? And then, if there is something difficult, and I have seen him handling it with poise, with dignity, and like a statesman. And you'll say, if you're saying something that he doesn't agree, you don't agree with you, he says, just a second. Let me explain to you what it is. He'll say, Vijay, let me say something. And if he sees, and he is so, he precedes and foresees what you're going to say. If you are agitated and he knows there is a problem, he says, I understand. I understand, keep going, no problem. Let's work together. It's going to be a wonderful place to work, okay? So Howard, not only have you been a friend, a guide, a mentor to all of us, you've been a scholar. And you have written already 5 books. Actually, 6th one is in the works. And it's called The Fire in the Brain. It deals with all the 6 diseases the center is dealing with. I had the pleasure of reading the book. It's not published yet. And actually, I recommend all of you read the book. And while he was a resident, he wrote this Neurology for House Officers, and which has actually become a legend, and every person, in fact, going neurology training reads this book. And it has been translated in 6 different languages. Not only does he write books, he has had movies. And people mistake these as 2 different movies. No, they're the same. It was first called The Lost Poker Game, and then he changed the name to The Abe's and Phil's Lost Poker Game. And in fact, he also made a movie called What's Life? And Life's Big Questions. And, because I do not know this, and I thought, in Hindi, they say Janta Janardan. Actually, that means the audience is the one that actually sees what you are making, what is your art, how do they feel about it. So we are so close to Howard, we do not know what people are thinking about it. So I actually did a Google search to see what people are thinking about his movies. I know about science, but I can't judge the movies. I mean, I am too close to him. So here is Cynthia saying, just watched it again. A beautiful gift to humanity. And for the Lost Poker Game, an impressive nuanced drama that tugs at the heartstrings. So Howard, it's not just the science of the books. You have been an amazing storyteller, amazing writer, and the books and the cinema, they equally seem to go hand in hand with you. I don't know how you manage both art and science together. He has pioneered actually at least 4 different fields. He has actually published 685 papers. And they belong, I could categorize them into 4 different areas: immunology and MS and ALS, mucosal tolerance, neurodegenerative diseases, microbiome. So I'm going to slowly go through all these 685 papers. So you can see, they keep coming. And I do not know how he does it. You can see there's from Steve Hauser, there is from David Hafler, and these are all the papers he wrote on the MS. And in fact, there is also one from Fran on the biomarkers. And this is the original paper. They talk about these immunosuppressive therapies in MS. And then this next one that he worked on oral tolerance, and this was started a long time ago. And Yohai actually was the student and postdoc here, and he published many of these papers showing that he could make these clones, and he could tolerize, he could transfer the tolerance with clones, and these were named as Th3 cells. And this was the time I came here and, in fact, worked with Yohai and Howard to characterize these clones. And they have become classic, and they are called, we have only had Th1 cells, Th2 cells, and he gave us Th3 cells. He also has worked with Dennis and in Alzheimer's disease. And he would tell me, and I will go and talk to him about science. And I used to ask him, he says, Howard, I'm not a neurologist. I mean, I can understand inflammation in the brain, but how big is this Alzheimer's thing, what Dennis is doing? And he would say to me, he says, trust me, it's bigger than MS. And he worked with Dennis on these and really did an outstanding job in actually how to tolerize by nasal and mucosal tolerance, and wrote a series of papers. So I will not show you all the 685 papers, because I will take a couple of more days, and this is the last one, that his interest in microbiome. So I'm going to leave you with a video, which really brings together all the talents of Howard as a scientist, as an artist, as a director. And above all, I think it's a dedication to human disease, that every time you talk to him, ultimately he wants to say the answer to the disease, find treatment for the disease. And there is no politics in it. It's the science that matters. And I'm going to leave you with this movie. And in fact, it's heart-wrenching.
Ticket for the long way round, 2 bottles of whiskey for the way, and I sure would like some sweet company. Leaving tomorrow, what do you say? When I'm gone, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone. You're gonna miss me by my hair, you're gonna miss me everywhere. Oh, you're gonna miss me.
He's really playing it.
The Weiner lab is working night and day. You won't lose your memories. We got test tubes and microscopes that give us so much hope. We'll surely cure this bad disease. Don't be gone, don't be gone. We're gonna keep you sharp and strong. You're gonna hang out at your dad's. You're gonna grow with your kids. You're gonna be where you belong. Don't be gone, don't be gone. We're gonna keep you sharp and strong. You're gonna hang out at your dad's. You're gonna grow with your kids. You're gonna be where you belong.
So this was the movie, and that was selected out of 725 submissions to NIH Director's Transformative Grants, which Howard and Dennis got. And I could never figure out, how could you solve MS or AD by flipping cups? Maybe I missed a trick or two. So Howard, I really want to thank you for your friendship, for your wisdom, for your passion, courage, curiosity, and mentorship. So for being a part of my life, you changed my life and my career. I am blessed to have you in my life. Thank you.
So Vijay, thank you so much. There's really nothing to say. There's nothing to say. I have my talk and I have my title, but I wanted to, you talk about partnerships and people that you love. and you're one of them. So I'll start with a few slides of us, and here we go. So we spend a lot of time together over the years. Here's some pictures. I guess I paid for all these dinners. Yeah. Here we are by the ocean somewhere. Here we are in Israel when we left this conference from Jerusalem and took a taxi to Tel Aviv and had a nice dinner at this Mantray restaurant, and then we went to ballet thing. Here's our families. Here's Karen and yourself, myself, and Mira. And here's the Biogen IDEC professorship that I received. And this is, you're very special to me. And I mean, you say that I helped you a lot, etc., but you're one of the major people in my lives. The professorship was given to me by Biogen IDEC with a big gift, but it couldn't have my name, so I chose my maternal grandfather. His name was Samuel Wasserstrom. He died in the Holocaust. He asked my mother to have if she had a son, to be a doctor. And I became that doctor. And you bear my grandfather's name. It's hard for me to talk about my grandfather without tearing up. So every time I try, I cannot do it. So let's get into the science. So this is my title, Bringing Basic Science to the Clinic, a 30-year odyssey. I don't know where you got the 30 years. It's actually 43 years. And here we have myself and Ann Romney on television. We went on to CNN after she established the Ann Romney Center. I sat there very quietly. They asked her all the questions about presidential candidates and elections, etc. But I was very happy I took care of her. She has MS. And we've kept her in good shape by giving her a lot of treatments. Now she's not on treatment. And she said to me, she was in the middle of a presidential campaign, and it's funny, she called me, she says, Mitt's running for president, Howard. We're going to have to delay this center a little bit. But we finally got it going. And she said, well, you have to distill what you're doing into words that everybody can understand. And so this is the sayings that I came up with, but they really distill what Dennis and I have been doing since we started the center and what makes it such a magnificent place. And the first thing I call drilling for oil. And, no one will give you money to drill for oil because they'll say, what if there's no oil there? And so Dennis and I are happy to give people money to drill for oil, and every once in a while there's a gusher, and then all the money comes in. The other point is breaking down silos to do different things and put things together in different ways. The final thing, and Michael Schlossmacher mentioned a little bit with Dennis, is well, you need to translate what you're doing, is what I call shots on goal. And a shot on goal is to treat people and to do some type of clinical trial. And whether you want to use soccer or hockey, you can't score a goal if you don't take a shot on goal. And so we have been doing that, and that's what I've done all my life. So that if you want to talk about bringing basic science to the clinic, it's shots on goal. So my talk is going to be focused on 5 shots on goal over my whole career, and what I've succeeded, what I failed, etc. So I was interested in multiple sclerosis when I first started as a young faculty member, and the big question is MS caused by a virus, or is it caused by an autoimmune response? Now, I never really thought it was caused by a virus per se, but I took basic training in Bernie Field's lab to learn about viruses. And interesting, where's Michael? He worked on reovirus, and I worked on reovirus. So I was interested in what you're saying. But I always thought it was an autoimmune response. So, but how can you prove that? How do you prove that? Well, you have to go to the clinic to prove it. And if it is autoimmune, then is the immune response humoral or cellular? That's a big question. Now, if it's humoral, then maybe you can take out antibodies. And so in, I think this is 1980 we published it, so in the 86 or 88, we did a pilot study of plasma exchange in multiple sclerosis to see whether that could do something. I did it with Dave Dawson. Here's a picture of Dave Dawson at those times. I won't show all the pictures that David and Steve showed about me getting the plasma exchange. But so I was working on plasma exchange. And the other way was through cellular mechanisms, and that's Steve Hauser. And there we are in the Enders building. Here he is working on this old TRS-80 computer. And we carried out what has become a classic trial in multiple sclerosis, where we gave intensive immunosuppression in patients with progressive MS. That's the title of it. It was published in the New England Journal, and we really saw a dramatic effect. And it was so dramatic that I was on the news. Here's a picture of me, I think, in Newsweek. Here I am on the New York Times, and we really found that we had helped a lot of people. But life is not always that easy, and I've had two major scientific issues that I had to struggle with in my life, and this related to cyclophosphamide because the Canadians published in 1991 that they treated people with cyclophosphamide and it didn't work. And it was presented at a big national meeting. I don't think Marty Samuels is here, but he remembers sitting there, and these people who couldn't find it were vitriolic and openly attacked me. How can you be treating people with this chemotherapy drug? You're hurting them. You don't know what you're doing. They wrote letters in journals that said Harvard shouldn't allow me to continue. And many people said to me, Howard, what are you going to do? I said, well, there wasn't anything I could do. I know we had helped people, we just have to understand it better. In fact, I was coming up for promotion to professor at that time, and one of these people wrote they were asked to write a letter for my promotion. Anonymously, of course, but of course I found out about it. And it was a slanderous letter, really slanderous. And even though I had all these papers and all these things, Harvard would not promote me. And in fact, Gene Brownwald, who brought Dennis and I there, he showed me the letter. He says, Howard, we got to fight this. We wrote back a letter to Harvard, but they said, no, we can't promote someone to professor if there's any controversy about what he's found. So this was not an easy thing for me. As it turned out, our trial was done without MRI scans, and Henry McFarland, who was at the, is there a pointer here? Yeah, Henry McFarland, who was at the NIH, did a study with pulse cyclophosphamide and showed very clearly that the cyclophosphamide did something on MRI. We continued to study our patients and found that response to therapy was linked to duration of disease, et cetera. But their study wasn't that bad, but it was just different than ours. And you really have got to go where the science leads you, and you can't be afraid to try and understand. And the fact of the matter, both the Canadians and we were right. In other words, the patients that we had treated were actually progressing, but they had a lot of attacks. They were very active inflammatory, and that's why the cyclophosphamide just shut everything down. They took patients who had been progressive for many years, didn't have any inflammation, and treated them, and that's why they didn't see anything. And now we understand more about mechanisms of progressive MS, and we don't use strong immunosuppression anymore in progressive MS. Our approach with the cyclophosphamide is vindicated. People in Johns Hopkins were then giving higher doses of cyclophosphamide than we were doing to try and do something for the patients, and now strong therapy to modulate the immune system has become standard for multiple sclerosis. We did a double-blind study of true versus sham plasma exchange and found that to be positive. Brian Weinschenker at the Mayo Clinic did another study, found it to be positive. And now it is accepted in multiple sclerosis to treat with strong immunomodulatory agents now at the onset of disease, and plasma exchange is used in people who have acute attacks and don't recover. So those shots on goal turned out to really help people. Now here we are. These are the early days. You see Steve Hauser, and that's Bob Brown. He spoke here yesterday, couldn't be here today. He's holding a pizza. I guess I paid for that pizza. There's Mark Tardeau and Maureen Polsby. And Bob, as you heard, is very interested in ALS. And there was a lot of theory that ALS may have been an immune-mediated disease. And so we did a trial with Bob where we gave high-dose cyclophosphamide to ALS patients. And we were hoping, maybe we'll see something. We saw something with MS, but we didn't see anything. We now are treating ALS patients with more sophisticated immunotherapy. Imagine if this had worked, how it would have helped the patients. But that was a shot on goal that didn't go in. At that period of time, one of my first fellows was Adriana Fintana. And Adriana is here. Thank you for coming. There's a picture of you. You haven't changed. He has an identical twin, so sometimes if you're in Zurich, you think it's Adriano, but it really isn't. The next person that I became very close with is David Hafler. And here we are at the FASCIB meeting. We went to these FASCIB meetings in Vermont. I actually had a beard. It's the only time I had a beard. David doesn't here, but he, every once in a while, he has a beard. He doesn't have a beard, depending when you see him. But let me just say that David, I don't know, you have 90, you counted all the papers we did, and David was here for almost a quarter of a century. And so David gets credit as a wonderful partner to help build up our center and build up the whole MS side. So David, thank you. But we still were trying shots on goals. Here David has a beard. Now he's got a big one. This is a woman named Lynn Sherman who we were treating, and we tried other things. One of the things we did was try monoclonal antibodies. I think we were the first people to give monoclonal antibodies for an autoimmune disease. And we just went to Schlossman's lab and got their antibody. And once we were in the parking lot, David said, "Are you sure we want to do this? I mean, what's going on here?" But we did it, and we didn't cross state lines. That's right. That's why we could do it. So we treated people with an anti-T12 monoclonal. We treated people with, what does it say there? Anti-CD4 and anti-CD2, and we saw immune responses. Larry Steinman, who's here, has also pioneered and used monoclonal antibodies against T4 cells. We did make an observation, or David made the observation, that when we gave the monoclonal antibody, it didn't cross into the blood-brain barrier, didn't cross into the spinal fluid, but there were cells that had the antibody on its surface, and that proved that you had trafficking of cells into the nervous system. So that's shot on goal number one. Excuse me. Shots on goal number two is oral tolerance. This is a paper that I published with Paul Higgins, where we suppressed EAE by giving myelin basic protein or one of its fragments. Sorry, I just came back from Israel and I'm recovering from a cold. Now, one of the The main people who worked on that, you just heard him talk, is Yohai Chen. And Yohai published 2 classic papers, one in Science, where he found regulatory T cell clones induced by oral tolerance, another in Nature, where he found a peripheral deletion of antigen reactive cells. You'll see Vijay's name on one, David's name on another. After, 50 papers, multiple talks, started a company, raised $140 million, did phase 1 trials, did phase 2 trials, got the initial trials published in Science, I think twice in Science. One, we do the phase, here's the company, here's autoimmune. I do like to play golf, Vijay. Luckily, Bob Bishop liked to play well. This is a golf outing. Here's David. Here's Scott Zanville and Patsy and the whole team. Here's a picture of Ahmad Al-Sabah, who's here, who was preparing bovine myelin and working at autoimmune. And so we did phase 3 trials in MS, in rheumatoid arthritis, and in type 1 diabetes, and they all failed. And Vijay spoke a little bit about that. I can tell you when you do a big trial, and it's a public company, and you go to report it, it's done in secret because they don't want the stock market to know. And you may have worked for 10 years on it. You get the answer in 30 seconds. The statistician walks in, and he says, I have bad news, we didn't meet our primary endpoint. That's it. Or, I've got good news, we did meet our primary endpoint. So, Dennis, I can imagine Al Sandrock, the 30 seconds where they said, Al, I hate to tell you, we have to stop the aducanumab trial. So this was another major disappointment that I had to deal with. This is a woman, Susan Quinn, who wrote a book about Marie Curie. Then she decided to write a book about me. And she thought she was going to have a great breakthrough, but it didn't work. And so she published a book, Human Trials, which is a double entendre. You do human trials, but there are a lot of human trials. So this was a big disappointment, and it was tough. But I didn't, someone asked me how you can do it when it's tough. I sometimes think about my grandfather and what he went through and how tough was that. And what would he say to his grandson? He says, Howard, forget it, just keep going. And I think about that. So what next? What do we do next? Well, we keep working. And I discovered almost by chance that you can induce oral tolerance by mucosally giving anti-CD3 monoclonal antibody. How did we do it? We found in a T-cell receptor transgenic mouse, you could feed ova and you got regulatory cells. So then the question was, in a wild-type mouse, could you give anti-CD3 and mimic the effect of oral ova in an ova T-cell receptor transgenic mouse? I remember people in the laboratory were there, and I told them, I want you to feed this monoclonal antibody, and they said, Howard, you're crazy. And I said, just do it. So I was lucky I could just tell them to do the experiment. Here's a paper in Nature Medicine. Oral CD3 specific antibody suppresses EAE by inducing these unique regulatory cells, LAP regulatory cells, which will play an important role as we go forward. So there were a number of animal models that we could treat with oral anti-CD3. How does anti-CD3 differ orally and IV? When you give it IV, you remove CD3 from the surface. When you give it orally, you don't. It's processed in the gut. Here's Taka Oida, who was in the laboratory, and he did studies with these LAP-positive cells, and it also worked in colitis. I kept working, and we gave anti-CD3 nasally. Think about it, giving a monoclonal antibody nasally. And there were a number of animal models that worked nasally. You can see them here. And what happens when you give a monoclonal antibody nasally? It doesn't go into the brain. It localizes in the cervical lymph nodes. And the person who did these experiments is Lior Mayo. Here he is with Chantal Kuhn, who works on anti-CD3. Here's Lior in Israel in his laboratory. Nothing is more satisfying than to see one of your fellows in their own lab. And I've had that joy over and over again. So this is a great picture of Lior. Here's a progressive form of EAE, and you can see they have an attack, they recover, and you can see the nasal anti-CD3 works. It protects from myelin loss and axonal injury. But very important is it decreases inflammatory astrocytes. And talking to Vijay yesterday, he wonders whether inflammatory astrocytes are important in progressive MS. And the nasal anti-CD3 also affects microglial cells. Here's changes after giving a nasal anti-CD3 in this progressive model. And so you have the mechanism of oral versus nasal anti-CD3, an IL-10 Treg versus a TGF-beta Treg, depending on the dendritic cell that processes it. This is a beautiful figure made by none other than Scott Zanville. Here's Scott. Here's Vijay. And we heard Scott talk today, and he reviewed the paper and wrote that beautiful, beautiful figure. So then the question is, can anti-CD3 be given orally to people? That's what we want to do. We want to give it orally to people. And I went around to every company, and I couldn't get anti-CD3 from industry. Think about it. I went to Toller, I went to Lilly, I went to GSK. I said, it's so easy. We just give it orally. No, we're giving an IV. We can't do it. So what do? This was very frustrating. A solution, we just bought OKT3 off the shelf and fed it to humans to try and prepare for shot on goal. This is work I did with Yaron Ulan, who's in the audience. He's a visiting professor from Israel, was last year 10 years ago, and we gave oral OKT3 to human subjects and found an effect. Yaron did a study of oral anti-OKT3 in patients with NASH. And then, as luck would have it, I get a call from somebody that they just acquired firalimab. This is OKT3. These are the other monoclonals that are being used, and somebody from Tiziana called me and says, we just acquired the firalimab, and we've read all your papers. Do you want to help us develop it? So, and this took about 8 or 9 years, and so we got access to the firalimab, which is a fully humanized monoclonal antibody, and so we're getting ready for a shot on goal, and we're actually doing a study now where we're giving nasal anti-CD3 at 3 doses to healthy volunteers. Tanuja Chitnis is clinically running the study. Claire Beecher-Allen is doing the immunology. People are being dosed as we speak. We're almost done. The results are no toxicity, and immunologic effects were observed. So that sounds pretty good. That's nasal anti-CD3. And who are we going to treat? Well, we're going to treat progressive MS patients. We're ready to do that. And I'll tell you, it's very interesting. Nasal anti-CD3, this is work that Oleg and I did with Nargis. Nasal anti-CD3 has an effect in ALS because it downregulates microglial cells. So I've spoken to Merit Sudovich at the Mass General, and we're going to treat patients with ALS with nasal anti-CD3. We wonder, would it help Alzheimer's disease? We don't know. It could decrease inflammation, and I've been talking to Dennis and Reese about it. Dennis has looked at all the data, and if possible, we may do some nasal anti-CD3 in Alzheimer's patients. So from that failure of oral tolerance, one wonders, how can we make it work? Number one, it may be that when someone has an autoimmune disease, there's a lot of inflammation in the body, and you have to treat them first with something. Maybe you treat them with anti-CD20 or a course of immunosuppression before you try and tolerize them. You have to decide which way to give it. Maybe use an adjuvant. And Tanuja had an idea done by Raphael that the anti-CD3 orally actually conditions dendritic cells in the gut, and when you give anti-CD3 plus antigen, it works better. So we may have a way to treat with combination. And finally, the microbiome. I'll talk a little bit about the microbiome, but Raphael and Lori have found that the microbiome is very important for oral tolerance, and we've identified bacteria that can make oral tolerance better or worse. Shots on goal 3, cancer. Discovery of a new checkpoint inhibitor for treatment of cancer is an outgrowth of studies on oral tolerance. This was kind of unexpected. Now, in my movie, Abe and Phil's Last Poker Game, there's a guy who wants to be live forever or whatever, so he drinks cancer cells. He's drinking human cancer cells because he thinks it'll help him live longer. And then he's talking to Paul Sorvino's talking to the director of nursing home, and he says, well, what will it help I got cancer, is that going to help me? He says, well, it can help old age and it can cure cancer on the side. So here I was studying oral tolerance, and I may end up having a treatment for cancer just on the side. By the way, eating cancer cells orally is the last thing you want to do for the cancer because it'll shut down the immune response against it. So how did we get to this? First, there's somebody named Taka Oida who made a monoclonal antibody against LAP. And here's a paper that he published because LAP is a surface protein. We gave the anti-LAP antibody in an oral tolerance model induced by anti-CD3, and it abrogated oral tolerance. So it worked just like we thought it would. Anti-LAP abrogates oral tolerance. So then the question is, I had this idea, I said, well, wait a minute, what if you give anti-LAP in cancer? And so that was a question. Galina Gabriali, who's in the laboratory, began doing experiments, and it was one of those things where almost every experiment worked. Every cancer we tried, or that she tried, when you give anti-LAP, it worked. We published a paper in Science Immunology. Here's all the people who worked on it, and it promotes anti-tumor immunity. We have good news that came out a few days ago. Well, we started a company, the Brigham and us, we started a company called Telos, and then a few days ago we learned, we didn't know about it, that Merck paid $773 million to Telos to get our anti-LAP antibody. So this is pretty exciting. The company was set up in 2016. We got money from the Partners Innovation Fund. It's based on work by Galina and myself at the Brigham, and it holds the ability to treat different cancers. Now, when people saw that, they thought, are you going to retire? They see $773 million. The way it works is you get it in little pieces. So initially the hospital gets, I don't know, 20 million or something. There's percentages that we get. So we get a few $100,000 initially. They can go to the lab in the department that I can use for travel. Galina can buy a new house. But it's not going to change our lives. But as time goes on, there's other milestones, and if it goes into begin phase 2, other milestones kick in. If it goes into phase 3 without even working, other milestones kick in. And then you're talking about millions of dollars coming in, which would be nice. If it ultimately becomes a drug that's used, Dennis, we won't have to raise money for the ARC&D anymore. Now, I guess a good omen was I was getting off the plane, and I saw this woman holding up a sign that says LAP. So I figured that's a good sign for our company and for the future of LAP. So does anyone want to guess what this stands for? This is the Los Angeles Philharmonic. She was welcoming the Los Angeles Philharmonic to Boston, but I think it's LAP anyway. Okay, shots on goal. So anyway, it's interesting, all that work and the years and the money and everything oral tolerance and autoimmune, it all failed. And then because of that, this kind of clicks in. I guess this all happened about 10 years, over 10 years. Shots on goal for the microbiome. And we're investigating the gut-brain axis in 5 diseases being studied at the Ann Romney Center. Here's the paper that we published on alterations of the human gut microbiome. We did a study of a probiotic on the microbiome, and Hartman talked about what you could do. I will say that a large portion of the laboratory is now actively working on the microbiome. We're very excited about it. We've recruited Lori Cox, who's here, who's a microbiologist. She's not a neurologist, but she's learning neurology and is really helping us set up our whole microbiome in all these diseases. So I go to the neurology meetings and, okay, we got to get all the Parkinson's patients, we got to get the Alzheimer's patients, we got to get the ALS patients. I could talk for an hour on all the preliminary data we have. We have amazing preliminary data, microbiome affecting microglial cells, microbiome affecting different diseases, et cetera, et cetera. We're planning a fecal microbiome transplant in MS just to try it. Now, interesting is Steve Hauser is doing the same thing, or Sergio Berenzini, and he's set up a big microbiome center at UCSF. Now, one of the very exciting potential shots on goal is an oral microRNA. Now, this is something you probably never thought about, or it's really crazy if you want to talk about thinking out of the box, et cetera, but Shirang Liu has been discovered microRNAs in feces. MicroRNAs in feces. No one looks for microRNAs in feces. And so then we looked at microRNAs in MS and EAE, and Shirang discovered a microRNA called MIR30D. And if you, from feces of MS patients and EAE subjects, and if you feed this microRNA, this is a microRNA, if you feed it, it shuts down EAE, shuts down type 1 diabetes, shuts down type 2 diabetes, and it does it by inducing akkermansia. And Hartman talked a little bit about akkermansia. We're not sure whether akkermansia is good or bad or whatever. We filed a patent on it. I was talking to Barbara Fox, who just sold Telos. I says, Barbara, I got another company for you. We can give this oral microRNA, which is easy to synthesize, and begin testing it. So this is going to be an immediate shot on goal. Here's the people. This is the opening we had of the last Abenfield's last poker game at the Coolidge Corner. Here's Shirang, who's made the microRNA. Here's Galena. Here's Lori Cox. This is Rafael, who's the head of our Brazilian mafia, because he keeps bringing all these Brazilians in the lab, and he's our oral tolerance guru. He also, I must always announce when I said he had triplets. How old are the triplets? I think they're about a year old, but imagine having triplets. How old are they? 15 months, okay. So these are all the people. We're growing up. Shirang, Galena, Lori, and Rafael are now instructors, and so they're on the way to in their academic career. So here's the book I wrote, Curing MS. And if I want to write a book, I was thinking of writing a book called MS, A Cure Within Reach. Steve said, I think we've got it, Howard. Well, what is a cure for MS? You have to halt the progression of the disease, reverse neurologic deficit, a vaccine to prevent MS. I think that's how we're ultimately going to cure it. I think progressive MS is our biggest problem, and we've started a progressive MS initiative. One of our patients whose wife has progressive MS has given a very nice donation, and we all meet together. We're doing treatment, we're doing MRIs, we're doing PET imaging, we're doing microbiome, we're doing biomarkers, we're doing clinical things, all on progressive MS. The next book, as Vijay mentioned, is called Fire in the Brain, where I talk about the 5 diseases here at the center. In terms of understanding MS, one of our big things is the CLIMB study. These are all the people involved in the CLIMB study. Here's our latest picture of all the people, which is a longitudinal study of MS. If you want to understand MS, you've got to understand individual patients and how they do. Tanuja Chitnis is the director of the CLIMB study. Here we are at the ECTRIMS meeting. And then I'll show you two pictures, and I'll tell you which one is my favorite, but it'll be easy to tell. This is Tanuja and Fran, where they both became professors. And David remembers, I don't know who said it, if you can't be too many people at Harvard, right, who are professors related to MS or whatever, but we just keep having one after another after another. And so the nice thing, and this related to the ARC&D, so Fran became a professor on the highest level basic work, and Tanuja became a professor on the highest level clinical trials and clinical work, and that's really amazing, and it happened on the same day. This is the picture, but this is the one I really like. Both of they each have 2 kids, and they came for the professor ceremony. Before I go on to the last shot on goal, I've tried to show pictures of everybody who's come and everything, but I want to give special thanks to Steve Miller. Here's your picture, Steve. I don't know what's going on. Here's Yohai. But thank you for coming, and we look forward to playing golf again. Hartmut, I want to thank you for coming. This is an old picture. You've seen it before. We're drinking beer after a jog. And here's Iron Cohn. It's in Germany. And last but not least, my doppelganger, Larry Steinman, who is just an amazing person. Larry, thank you so much for coming and helping out. So now we go to the last shot on goal. And the last shot on goal is Alzheimer's disease. And I will say that Alzheimer's disease is our biggest challenge. It's our biggest challenge. So here's a picture. I won't make you guess, but this is Samuel Wasserstrom, okay? For whom, my grandfather, for whom Vijay is named. And this is my mother in Vienna. Before the war, they got these great little hats. This is my aunt, of course. So there's my mom and Samuel Wasserstrom. And here is my mom as a beautiful young woman. And here's my mom when she came down with Alzheimer's. You can kind of see a blank look in her face. I brought her to see Dennis. Dennis was as compassionate and helpful as always. She thought something was wrong. She says, "Howie, aren't you a brain doctor? Can't you do something for me?" And I said, "Well, Mom, we don't have anything yet." So I've been touched by that, and obviously she passed away. But I actually have begun working on Alzheimer's. And I was just at the ADP meeting, and it's just kind of amazing. Here I am at the I'm an MS doctor, right? I'm at the ADPD conference, and I'm giving a symposium talk on Alzheimer's. And I'm talking about innate immunity and the role of the microbiome. So that's very exciting. And here are two of the people that I'll show some of their work. This is Danny Frankel, he's here. This is a little bit of the Israeli mafia. This is Danny Frankel. This is Alon Montenegro. I guess I bought whatever was here. One of the things that Danny and I do is take picture with his kids. It's really interesting. I remember when Vijay's son was first born, and we had a 1 year thing. And then time goes on, and you see them as young men and young women. And so we're going to keep taking pictures, Danny, until we go to their wedding together. So this is the theory that we're working on, the innate immune system, looking at monocytes, and I'll tell you about that, looking at microglial cells. This was developed with Oleg Butovsky, and this is a figure related, and you heard a little bit about the microglial cells and all the different aspects that we're studying. Here's Oleg and I actually at an ALS meeting where we were talking. And so here's studies that have gone on for a number of years on amyloid and Alzheimer's disease. Here you see now Dennis's name. Here's Alon Montenegro, where we looked at response of amyloid protein in transgenic mice. Here we're looking at T cells. Again, now I get to work with Dennis. And this is increased T. This is very interesting. And Dennis, we have to go back to this in terms of T cell reactivity to Alzheimer's, increased T cell reactivity in older patients. Here's Alon. Here's Victor. This is Tanuja's husband. Did you meet him in the center? Yes. Okay. So there's a good thing. And here's Risa. Here's Risa and Dennis and myself. So, and here's another paper by that Victor is on, looking at immunology of Alzheimer's. Dennis and I did a trial where we gave, this is a great paper. I'm first author and Dennis is the last author. I just love that paper. Where we gave nasal A-beta peptide and we actually saw something that was positive. We didn't know exactly what the cause was, and we were ready to do a shot on goal and go into trials. And at that time, 6% of the AD patients who were immunized with A-beta got meningoencephalitis. So the whole trial was stopped. I remember we bought, I think it cost $35,000. We bought the peptide to give to people. It was GMP. We talked to the FDA. They said, you're not giving A-beta to anybody. So we gave this GMP $35,000 A-beta peptide to the laboratory to use. But I wondered then, and Larry Steinman was involved in looking at a lot of this stuff as well. Well, why did these Alzheimer's patients get this encephalitis, and how does it relate to EAE? So I did a study to find out whether APP mice are more susceptible to EAE, and could you induce EAE if you gave beta amyloid with pertussis? And the answer to both experiments is negative. They're not more susceptible to EAE, and you couldn't induce EAE. However, interestingly, when we looked at the brain of the animals with EAE, it cleared all the amyloid. And so then the question was, well, is it only just antibody? Is it antibody dependent? Well, we can do this very easily in mice. We looked at B-cell deficient mice, and it wasn't related to antibody. Well, you can't treat Alzheimer's by giving them EAE or MS, so is there a way to do that? And after a lot of work and struggle, et cetera, we discovered an adjuvant called Protalin, which is made up of Neisseria and also LPS, and found that that itself could treat the animals. And this is work done by Danny Frankel, who's here. And this is pretty remarkable. These are animals treated with the nasal Protalin. This is the A-beta, and this is the animals that are the control animals, and these animals treated with A-beta. How does it work? Oleg Butovsky did some chimeric experiments where we labeled peripheral monocytes, and we actually can show that in the animals that are treated, there's less A-beta, and there's more monocytes coming in. Danny also in Israel found that you could treat with Protalin with this cerebrovascular amyloidosis. It was based on this work and Oleg's work that we got the NIH Transformative Award. Now the question is, where are we? Can we do a shot on goal? And it isn't easy to find the people to make the Protalin, to do this, to do that, et cetera. But I'm happy to report that just this spring, we put together a deal to manufacture nasal Protalin to treat humans. So we're getting ready for a shot on goal. It's a collaboration with the Chinese. We had a big ceremony. This is Biodextrous in Canada. This is ENWA. This is a company called IMAB. And how did we do this? Why did this company agree to put up, I mean, they're going to give $2 million to make the vaccine, and then they commit another $8 million for the trials. Why? What was the trick to doing it? Well, the trick is in this picture. David, do you know who that is? Yeah. This is Jingwu Zhang, who was a fellow in David's laboratory, who went to GSK, who went back to China, who set up a company, who kept in touch. And I called him, I said, Jingwu, I heard you just started a new company. You just work with GSK. Do you want to do nasal Protalin and Alzheimer's? And he said yes. He said yes. So we had a signing ceremony. And I apologize. Here we are. There's people taking pictures. There's people from China. There's Dennis. There's me. And here we are signing that. So I'm very excited about this and so excited to work together with Dennis on the nasal Protalin. And we've talked to Reese, and it opens up a lot of potential therapies that we can do together in Alzheimer's disease. So I'm coming towards the end. Here's another question. You heard a little bit. It's called "What is Life?" You know, I was a philosopher. Dave was a chemistry, philosophy. Yeah, and so I didn't know how to answer the big questions. What happens when you die? Is there free will? All these different things. So I made a movie. That's what you do to answer these questions. Traveled around the world. One of my MS patients is on the movie, and actually this movie won Los Angeles Film Awards. There are the awards I won, and this came out in 2011, and there it says director. That's not doctor, that says director. I made another movie, which was more of a Hollywood movie called Abe and Phil's Last Poker Game. Vijay, do you know why they changed it from The Last Poker Game to Abe and Phil's Last Poker Game? Because they say if you start a film with the letter A, when it comes up on all the lists, they sell more of the movies. So they come up with a name that starts with A. So this involved Academy Award-winning Martin Landau and Goodfellas Paul Sorvino. It's a long story how I got to do the movie, but I did it. They loved the script. Interestingly, one of the characters has Alzheimer's in the movie, and it plays an important role. Here's the poster with Martin and Paul. He's a Jewish doctor, an Italian womanizer and gambler. They become friends. They're both impotent, which plays a role in terms of losing things when you get older. She's a nurse looking for her biologic parents, gets an anonymous note that her father's in this home. She meets the two old guys. They both want to be her father. So it's a story of searching for roots, getting old, etc. And here's a review in the Village Voice. Martin Landau made the movie when he was 87. He died when he was 89. He was at Tribeca when it came out, but he wasn't there for the release. And somewhere up here it says Howard, Weiner, an eminent neurologist, etc. And they said very nice things about it. Most of the reviews are good. I think 70-75% of the reviews are good. Some of them are really outstanding. Every once in a while there's a really bad one. You know, you don't like to read those, so you just don't read them. But as a scientist, we're used to bad reviews. In the California Film Festival, it won the Best Feature Drama, and Martin Landau won as Best Actor. Here we are at the Tribeca Film Festival, where I met all kinds of people. Here's Robert De Niro, who sent me champagne for the movie. Everybody wants to know, are you going to make another movie? I have 2 other scripts that are being looked at in Hollywood today. Whether they get made or not, I don't know. One is called Subways, which is an existential movie of a doctor who goes through a midlife crisis in New York. The subways represent his subconscious, so he goes into subways that represent his subconscious, like Temptation, Mother, The Grass is Always Greener, Subway. Then he comes back up and he tries to get out of the subways. Love Kills is very simple. It's a medical thriller, opens with a murder in the hospital. Characters are 2 young doctors, a beautiful nurse, and a patient who's very sick who gets an experimental medicine and falls obsessively in love with one of the doctors. and then it gets very complicated, and then one of the doctors gets murdered, and the patient dies, and you'll have to watch the movie to figure out what happens. So now I'm talking about partnerships, and here's a couple partnerships of the utmost importance. There's Dennis and Polly and Mir and myself, who are a little younger. Here's a picture of us, I guess last spring or the spring before, when we went out to the Romneys, had something in Salt Lake City, and we walked around and had a good time, and we even got a big donation from that afterwards, which was very good. My own personal partner, who's the most important partner, here she is, on Elliott Street, Dennis remembers, that's Mira, our two sons. The baby is an Academy Award-winning Emmy-winning comedy writer, and the other one is a Wharton graduate. That's on Elliott Street, and here's a very beautiful picture of my partner, Mira. Now, Dennis. Okay, so Dennis is, I call him my wonderful partner, and I mean it. He is my wonderful partner. I didn't have pictures to show that everyone hasn't showed, so here's the famous picture of us at the BI, and then here's the famous picture of us on the Tokyo walk. And we hear about all these things and how you did all these things and everything. So I tried to honestly, and I'm going to be serious now, I tried to honestly figure out, how did we do it? What are the factors? Why did Dennis and I succeed, et cetera, et cetera? So I actually wrote some things down, because I don't want to do this extemporaneously, to analyze why it worked. So first of all, I don't think this is something that happens very often. I think it was a perfect storm, a unique moment in time. You and I in our careers, Gene Brownwald opening up a thing, us having to meet each other, and I don't think you could necessarily create something. I think it was kind of the stars and the moon becoming aligned. So I think it was a unique moment in time, and I think that happens in many of our lives, in many things. I think when we started the center, it was actually good that AD and MS were separate, and they were pretty separate at the beginning. And the reason that was good is it allowed us to grow and develop our own areas without competing or worrying. And I think that was very important. We could support each other, et cetera. So I think that was an important point. We were friends, we were good friends, and I think that was important. The other point is I think we were equals, okay? And I think that's important. Now you can use any metaphor you want, that we could both run as fast, jump as fast, do the intellectual thing. I think we're both, if one of us was a lot better than the others, it wouldn't have worked. And I honestly think we are true equals. We each have our strengths and weaknesses, but we're pretty equal, and it related to the science we did, the awards we won. We both started companies. There's almost nothing that we weren't equal in doing. And even in the fundraising, we turned out to be good fundraisers, but even in the fundraising, you're creating the FND with Ned Johnson. That was your initiative and brilliance in doing it. And then my getting Ann Romney to set up the center and doing it. And that was and we did it together. And then, of course, I became good friends of Ned. You became good friends of Ann. So I think that's another thing. I think that we were equals. And I don't think you could have a partnership like this that is so successful if one is a lot better than the other. And I don't think one of us is better than the other. I am taller and you are handsomer, but doesn't bother me. What do I admire most about Dennis? I think his intelligence, his clear thinking. Those are his energy. Those are the two things. The other thing that helped us to succeed, there was always a goodwill. There was never a bad will between us, and I think that's very important. We didn't play games, and we both love science. We never had an argument. We really never, you can wonder, did you ever have an argument? We never had an argument. Sometimes we got stuck, okay, on something like we had moved to a new building. Who gets this office? Who gets that office? Certain things, who gets this? Who does that? Did you know what we did when we got to that problem? What do you think? We flipped a coin. We just flipped a coin. And then we remembered who won the previous coin flip. So then if you declare it's time for a coin flip, then you say, well, you won the one before, it's my turn. And we did it. We used to rotate coin flips. So that was one of the one of the things. And then in the end, it's kind of, you talk about a perfect storm of things happening. It may very well be that because we happen to come together, because you started in Alzheimer's and I started in something else, and now we're coming together, that the world may have treatments for Alzheimer's that they may not have had because you and I happen to come together. And so that's, I think, a very exciting possibility. So that's my analysis. I love you very much. It's just so wonderful to work together. And the emotional intelligence that you have, I know sometimes I'll say, Dennis, I'll be honest with you, Dennis, I don't understand how to solve this problem. I just tell him I don't understand, and he'll say, here's what I would do, Howard, So we're very honest with you. So anyway, again, I love you very much, and it's just a joy to have spent all these years together. So here's some slides. You've seen them before, but these are we have tons of pictures, but these are the ones that I came up with. And I think the exuberance and everything is there. There's one of them. Here we're dancing. And here we're singing at the top of our lungs. And then I'll leave with this particular slide. Let's continue to make music together. So now in your talk, you did give some final advice. You said pearls, whatever you call them. So I got to do the same thing because we're equal, right? We have to do the same thing. Okay, so here's my final advice slides. And I'm going to start with a quiz, so get ready. I'm going to ask people to raise their hands. You can't predict what this quiz is going to be. But here we go. Here's the quiz. Which famous politician won a Nobel Prize in literature? Okay, this is Church. What? Kennedy. Okay, so who says Franklin Roosevelt? Nobody. Who says Churchill? A lot of people. Who says Kennedy? Some people say Kennedy. The answer is Winston Churchill. Yeah, he wrote all that stuff, and it's kind of amazing. Here's a quiz. I don't have anything. Who won a Nobel Prize that wasn't a writer that everyone was really surprised? Why in the world are they giving him a Nobel Prize in literature? Bob Dylan. No, Bob Dylan. Yeah, Bob Dylan. He won a Nobel Prize. Philip Roth died. He never got a Nobel Prize. Bob Dylan gets a Nobel Prize. Okay. I've read a lot about Winston Churchill and his biographies and everything, and he has a lot of advice. Some of it we're aware of, and so I finished with advice from Winston Churchill. Okay? Number one is aim high. Okay? Aim high. And I've always tried to aim high. Dennis says that he likes to write the literature, not read the literature, so that's kind of a high thing. I wrote something that's a little hubris, or it has a little chutzpah. It goes like this. I want to be confronted with almost insurmountable odds with little chance of success. I want the stakes to be high. I want everybody watching, and I want to win. So that's aiming high, okay? So we got to not be afraid to aim high. Number two, you've got to work hard, and I put in very. I think you've really got to work hard. There's nothing like good hard work. So you aim high and you work hard. The next is be resilient, don't quit. And Churchill is famous for a quote, never, ever, ever quit. And you referred to that particular quote. Now, if you go on the internet and read all of it, says he never really said never, ever, ever quit. He gave a famous speech where he said don't give up or don't whatever. But he's never surrender. That's right. He said which never. But I have a little thing that I put on my desk that says never, ever, ever quit, and it's attributed to Churchill. So don't quit. Here's an important one for us all. Don't hold grudges. I think that's a very important piece of advice. Don't hold grudges. You shouldn't hold grudges. It isn't always possible, though. It isn't always possible. And here's a true story about my mother, okay? So as she got older, et cetera, before she, got into her Alzheimer's, I wanted to talk to her. I says, Mom, give me some lessons of life, give me some lessons of life. She says, Howard, don't hold grudges, because we were good friends with Charlotte and Max for all these years, and then they did something, we didn't talk to them for 20 years, and now we're back together, and you just shouldn't hold grudges. And then I knew about the story of Uncle Henry, and so I said to him, what about Uncle Henry, Mom? He says, Uncle Henry, never talk to him. What he did to your father. That's a true story. But you still shouldn't hold grudges, but, what can I say? And then the very last thing that you get from Churchill is to enjoy life. I think we really have to enjoy life. He did painting at the end. He did this watercolors, and he really enjoyed life. So my final message is aim high, work very hard, be resilient, don't quit, don't hold grudges unless you have to. Enjoy life. Here's a picture of the Ann Romney Center. And this is the last slide that I'll show that relates to our patients, etc., which I think is important, which we have, and that's the word hope. And I think there's a great deal of hope to help these people with these illnesses. I'm humbled and honored to have had all this here. I thank everybody. I admire so many people here for everything that they do. Vijay, I thank you for being here. David, I thank you for all the things we did together. And Dennis, we just keep making music. Thank you very much.